next push for the metals to get that bear's blindfolded removed is going to come when the Bitcoin halving comes and goes. People recognize it didn't go a lot further. People start to take profits, and they're going to apply it to where they've applied it for a couple thousand years, physical metals.
Are the rallies in gold, silver, and the precious metal mining stocks just getting started? Are we in the early innings? Today, we have an extra special guest. Peter Grandich is joining us. He brings decades of experience on Wall Street in financial planning and deep analysis of the gold, silver, and precious metal mining stock sectors to us today. Peter, welcome to Ron's Basement.
Always a pleasure, Ron. I see my friend over there. I told you I was coming for him. We're this close.
You're coming for him. You better worry. And what Peter's referring to is the gold bear there, whose blindfold comes off at $2,500 gold. And, Peter, I forgot to mention during my intro, darn it, that you also over the years were featured as a guest on pretty much every major news network out there. So what a big honor to have you joining us here in the basement. Are you feeling excited? Are you feeling trepidatious about these recent moves we've experienced in the precious metals?
Let me first respond to what you just said, Ronnie. 20 years ago, 25 years ago, I would have said I was lowering myself to be talking to some guy in the middle of Midwest, and I'm not on CNBC or some major investment conference in the world. But let me tell you from the bottom of my heart and on the life of my wife and daughter, my two most precious things God gave me, I sooner be speaking to you now than any of those major networks. So I'm very
Wow.
happy to be here. I've grown to appreciate certain people that I communicate with, and you are one of them. But that doesn't mean I'm still not coming for that freaking bear.
That's right. Well, yeah, it's a big honor for us, Peter. I'll throw in one last thing. You were when I started this channel 2 years ago, you were what I consider to be my first big time guest, and from there things have blossomed, and I've had the real benefit of getting to meet some other high quality people. But in my mind, you are still my number one big time guest. So thank you for being here. And when I look at the silver and gold price, remember those movies, Rocky? Remember the Rocky movies, Peter?
Yep.
And Rocky's always seems like the storyline's always the same. He's in a big fight and he keeps getting knocked down. He keeps getting knocked down, and he keeps coming back up. And it feels like to me that something has changed, and maybe it started back in December of last year. Maybe it's just been in the last 5 or 6 weeks with the gold and silver market and how it's reacting. I think we even saw that this morning. We're recording this on Wednesday, the 10th of April, 2024. We had CPI numbers come out that knocked down the price of gold. And right before we came on, it came bouncing back. Like it's like Rocky. It just keeps fighting back. Do you feel like maybe things are a little different right now?
Well, I think it's important that we regress just a little and understand that we did not, I shouldn't say we, I know you fit into this criteria. I certainly do, some others, because we also had very large exposure to mining shares and junior resource stocks up until a few weeks ago. For the previous 2 years, we were depressed, even though the metals themselves were performing extremely well. In fact, as they performed stronger and our shares didn't, we got more depressed. Because, and as I said to you before, we won't hear this again for decades. We would speak at the major gold conferences, and all the speakers would say the same thing. Owning mining shares is just like owning gold. Oh, we learned that was not the case, but it depressed us, and we didn't fully appreciate how well the physical metal prices were performing. Now, I'll also say to you, and I know you're very much interested in silver, and people didn't like it when I would say silver was second class to gold and all, but even it itself now has got its act together, and the metals themselves, uh, I would sooner, as like you said, when we speak, see a correction and a consolidation now, because I think if we truly want much higher prices, they'll be able to sustain themselves better with that. But like you, I agree. As we record this, And I just did a personal update on my own channel that gold should have fell between $50 and $100 after this news this morning. It fell maybe 25, and as we started to speak, it was off a couple of dollars. I, you never want to say this time it's different because it never really is. But it's certainly acting in a better manner than we've seen. And finally, I feel also that the shares themselves are beginning to act in a better manner, certainly than we saw for the last 2 years.
Yeah, yeah. I get this feeling, Peter, because it wasn't just this morning with the CPI numbers. We had great employment numbers, right? Bidenomics is doing its wonderful job. That was what, Friday of last week. The dollar is strong, or relatively strong, measured by the DXY. We're seeing lower odds of rate cuts. It almost feels like to me that gold and silver now as well are possibly, for a lack of a better way to say this, calling BS on the Fed, like saying, hey, you know what? Maybe there's the first crack in the confidence in the Fed. Because like you said, with these CPI numbers this morning, that should have raised the perception that the Fed will be hawkish for longer, and we should be down $50 or $100 on the gold price.
First Mining Gold is a development company advancing two of the largest gold projects in Canada, Springpole in Ontario and Duparquet located in Quebec. Each already has 5 million ounces of gold reserves, but exploration initiatives are underway at both projects to find even more gold. First Mining is well financed, has zero debt, and owns an interest in 4 additional Canadian gold development projects.
I think, Ronnie, the story is that the things we spoke about, you, me, and some others, who had a very strong bullish flavor for the metals in the last couple of years, many of the factors that we talked about that should bring prices up as they have actually occurred. And maybe we're not used to it being so right so long of a period, because normally we somehow getting our heads handed to us for one reason or another. But I think those are the things that are important here. Let's address some of them that you and I spoke about, and I know you speak about with others. First of all, the biggest story was that the metals trading has moved away from the paper hangers in London and New York and into Asia, where physical demand takes precedent and has been so strong. That I think is still the overriding reason, even today, as we speak. The second, of course, is that there's clearly a move away from the dollar. More and more countries want to enter the BRIC Association. Being involved in the BRICS is anti-dollar, and that's just a tide that Wall Street is just missing completely to not understand what this means and how I believe that in a few years' time, the BRICS will do to world trade similar to what the Industrial Revolution did. And that's being driven by gold because there's a underlining belief, and I think we're seeing enough strong hits to suggest that these countries are going to be more favorable to employing gold in some sort of new or alternative to the dollar. And finally, the last and perhaps most important thing is that outside the US, where there's still a lack of true interest in the metals, people are buying gold and to some extent silver as an investment, not just for protection, but to actually make capital appreciation. Listen, that's what I did, Ronnie. I did something that was very unusual, and I'm certain not 1% others did. In 2021, I said by the end of that year, I thought gold would outperform stocks and even bonds, and not to own general stocks or bonds, take gold over that as a choice. And guess what, Ron? It did.
Yeah.
The bottom
Yeah.
line, it has. So I think a long answer to your original question is it this time different? If it's not different, it at least feels different.
Yeah. Yeah. You mentioned this idea that outside of the United States, right? When we look at the 1.4 billion people that live in India, the 1.4 billion people that live in China, right? Almost 3 billion people, almost 10 times the population of the United States. And that's just, I like to say, the I in the C, the ick in the BRICS. There's 8 additional countries as well, all of which hold gold and silver in a much different regard than we do here in the United States. So we know there's robust demand in those countries. And if we look at what's going on here, I'm sure you hear the same thing, right? Like there's been ETF outflows. The retail silver and gold demand has picked up a little bit, but compared to, I heard Andy Schechtman say, compared to a year and a half, 2 years ago, demand is somewhat subdued right now. I guess my question is that in light of the fact that as we're recording this, we have silver trading somewhere around $28 per ounce and gold trading around $2,350 per ounce. What's going to happen if our fellow Americans and people in other Western countries do wake up and start to allocate even the smallest amount of their portfolios into silver, into gold, or, forbid, into precious metal mining stocks?
Well, there's always been an argument. There have been studies over the years, just a 1 or 2% shift out of paper assets, whatever they may be at the time, into the physical market, what dynamics can change. I think we're seeing that again outside the United States. There's always the vast majority miss, and then the hindsight always was, we had a false leader or we had a false premise. I think the false premise currently is Bitcoin. Now that's going to create anybody that sees this that's in Bitcoin. You might as well call their mother every name in the book because that's how they feel that you have.
You want me to call you? If you want me to call you a few dirty names, Peter, to get it out of the way?
The dirty names would be the easiest part of what they do. Some actually send life-threatening emails that somehow you're this person that should be done away with because you're ruining life for people and the cult and all this other stuff that I get. But why I just bring that up is that it's not to say that somewheres down the line, Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies will be part of something. But to be the end all and cure all versus something that worked for a couple thousand years. Nobody that's really doing a fiduciary responsibility, which I still think, even though I don't manage money personally anymore, our planning group does. I think one of the first responsibilities is that you give respect to something in anything, in any shape, not just investing. If something worked for a couple thousand years, you have to start to argue real hard why it shouldn't continue to work now. And so the people here that have choice that said, oh, gold is how many times I heard it was a relic and pet rock and all this other stuff. And the argument all is, and all this hype, and the hype is never, ever, I've been at this 40 years, Ronnie. Nothing from an investment product has been hyped to the level that Bitcoin has in the last 12 to 24 months. And yet, despite all of that, if you look at it in the broad range of the last couple of years, it's not going anywhere fast. So my argument is once this halving comes, which is supposed to be due any day or week now, what else are they going to have to propel it further? And the thing that they said you should be getting out of just keeps making new all-time highs. So I think the next push for the metals to get that bear's blindfolded removed is going to come when the Bitcoin halving comes and goes. People recognize it didn't go a lot further. People start to take profits, and they're going to apply it to where they've applied it for a couple thousand years, physical metals.
If you're looking to buy gold, silver, or platinum, do yourself a favor and check out Pimbex, the online precious metals bullion dealer and sponsor of Ron's Basement. I was a happy customer before they offered to support the channel. You'll find they have the best prices, quality, and service. I think Pimbex is best, and you will too. And be sure to tell them that you're from Ron's Basement.
Yeah, and it's been somewhat absorbed by the mainstream financial industry, right? We have Fidelity, BlackRock, And I know that for many years that was one of the arguments with Bitcoin as well. It exists with outside of kind of the mainstream financial system, and now it's been somewhat absorbed by it. And I'm not anti-Bitcoin, but I think there's certain components that need to be looked at when we talk about crypto. One thing that I think is a benefit and something that we share between the precious metals and the crypto world is kind of the base understanding that this fiat system, money printing, the fiscal monetary policies are doomed. I do think we share that common ground, and who knows, right? A lot of the people that maybe own Bitcoin now could easily be I don't want to say converted, but could become interested in silver and gold.
Well, I'll just say this much, because I know just spending this time, this will fall into some Bitcoin cult members, and we'll hear about it through emails. I get texts, I even get phone calls to our offices telling me, how crazy I am and all this kind of stuff. I'll just say that if you look at the original premise and study what the person who supposedly created it and the reasons for, Wall Street has done so much to damage those things, to bring it into a general criteria and to have exchange traded funds over it and all, takes away from the very theory that just a couple years ago we were sold on why you should own it. So I'll just say this, it certainly has kept some people out of metals. There's no question. The younger you go down the food chain, the more or less interest they are in the metals, and particularly even go down even more into mining shares and all. But I just learned one thing. 80% of money managers, according to Nobel laureate studies, underperform an index fund. So with Wall Street all pushing in one area now, and like you said, not really talking about gold, because Wall Street always treats gold as kryptonite. It just does.
Mm-hmm.
And the financial media tied to their hips does as well. There's going to come a point in time when people are going to say, listen, we might have overshot our view on this thing, and maybe it's time we look at. And that's going to be the group, believe it or not, because people always tell you, oh, you financial advisors tell us when to buy, you never tell us when to sell. Well, one of the times, probably, if it ever comes to the point where we need to truly start thinking of selling gold and silver, is going to be when all those type of people have switched into it. Now, everywhere you walk and hear, people are telling you to buy it. We're not even close to that, Ron, yet. But keep that in mind. And that's probably when that group is finally going to give in and come into something like this. And that's when we're going to be looking for the exit. But right now is when you and I speak. I would sooner markets don't do what you want them to do, but a consolidation now of this gain and going sideways would be much healthier for those that want to look for much higher gold and silver prices than continuing just rising here without even some consolidation.
Yeah. Do you think if you were to kind of button it up and put a real general idea or concept into or behind why people like you and I love silver and gold, a real simple explanation would be that the real value of the dollar is, no matter how you slice it or dice it, no matter how you analyze the real value of the US dollar in the coming 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, that when you look at kind of the domestic situation in the United States, socially, fiscally, monetarily, when you look at the geopolitical situation in the world, like you said earlier, de-dollarization going on, that it's unfortunate, because I know you're a proud patriotic American. I'm a proud patriotic American. But no matter how you try to, what angle you try to look at it through, it's almost an inevitability that the real value of the dollar is going to go down, and that's why silver and gold are good options right now.
Well, it's certainly why I got to the point where it began this year, and in March wrote a very detailed commentary on why it's time to build what I call a financial arc. That there were 5 main factors at that point in time, and there's more of them, and I'll just name them if you want to discuss them. If not, that's fine. The first was something that we've heard for years, but it's finally become acute. We've passed the point of no return, and that is the debt crisis is just out of hand. We're now having multi-trillion-dollar yearly deficits. It can't continue. The Congressional Budget Office told us that we're going to be at $54 trillion in hard debt, not counting Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, in less than 10 years. We're getting to the point where financing just the interest payments are a challenge. So that's number one. It's getting worse. The second was the retirement and aging crisis. I've discussed it. It's only getting worse. The third, which is really becoming acute now, and I even mentioned today and uttered these words for the first time to my own listening group, Ron, and that is the immigration crisis, invasion, whatever you want to call it, which is an economic invasion, is now going to probably lead to civil unrest. And I think that's a real big problem that's just going to really get bad by the time summer comes. The fourth is the BRICS. You and I just talked about it. America's the investment community has completely blown the understanding and not understanding what is transpiring by what's happening with the BRICS. And then the fifth, which is the one thing we would hope could fix any and all problems, is the worst of it all, political paralysis. The Democrats and Republicans cannot go in a room and make real good legislation anymore. And compounding that problem, there's fractions in each party now that are moving away from the center of the party. So the left, there's certain that are going more left, and there's more going right. So I don't see how we don't get things worse. And for a couple thousand years, the safety of gold and silver was offered to us and was a good thing to have during those crises. And it is here again. And that's what I believe is the underlining push to this all, why gold and silver has done what they've done and will continue to do well.
Fortuna Silver Mines is a global intermediate gold and silver producer. Since 2005, Fortuna's best-in-class management has delivered impressive growth and profits. Fortuna's solid financial position and operational expertise allows for performance in any precious metals price cycle and provides a foundation from which to harvest great profits in more favorable metals markets. Investing in Fortuna is an investment in quality, long-term, sustainable production of in-demand precious and base metals.
Yeah. Peter, you talked about, it may have been item number one, kind of the math behind why this doesn't work, right? The national debt, the deficit, the growing deficit. And the deficit's really, has been the driver. That's where the debt came from. And the deficit continues to grow. I heard someone say something that I thought was very interesting the other day about what's going on in Washington with the Democrats and the Republicans and why the deficit continues to grow. And he said that the Democrats are just mostly concerned about being able to spend more and more money, right, on different programs. They just want to spend, spend, spend. And the Republicans are primarily concerned with keeping taxes low. So as long as they continue to balance that, like as long as the Republicans get the low taxes, they'll let the Democrats overspend. And as long as the Democrats get to overspend, they'll let the Republicans keep the taxes low. And obviously that's a recipe for what we've seen already and will likely continue to see, because nobody's talking about this. I don't hear any of the presidential. I hear talk from Joe Biden about writing off everybody's student debt. Nobody wants to address the real big elephant in the room.
Well, the federal government can get away for it a little while longer. But even there, we're seeing tax levels goes up and services go down. But where the real issues coming, and it's not being discussed in the financial media, is on the state and local levels. Look, major cities like Houston are basically bankrupt. They don't have a printing press. They have to balance their budgets. California, tens of billions of dollars of a budget crisis. There's only two things governments can do, Ronnie. They can cut spending or they can raise taxes.
Yeah.
It's much easier to raise the taxes, reduce some of the government services, and that's what we're seeing now. And here's the other part, and why I think the immigration problem is going to grow acute even more than people are giving it time to. There is a certain element in the United States that barely gets by. It's been that way for decades, if not a century or more. But what little they got from the government is being taken away from them and given to the immigration scenario. Those people are not going to take it lying down, Ronnie. They're just not. No one should. I can't expect them to. And I believe that butting heads is coming to a head here, that we're actually going to see people against people and pointing, just as they did in Germany in the 30s, and point to a certain group and say, you know why your problem is bad? See those people over there? They're the reason for it. Such is going to be the case now with fingers pointed to immigrants by
Yeah.
other people that have been here for a while and been used to getting what little they could, and it's being taken away. So this problem is only going to get worse. And I think it's that type of atmosphere that will give the underlining support, unfortunately, to things like metals. And people outside the United States are not exactly immune from this either. These crisis with immigration is happening in Europe. It's happening in part of Asia. It's happening in Canada. If you want to know somebody that's even more of a mess than we are right now, it's our good friends to the north. So I don't see this problem getting better. It can only get worse. And that in turn is one of the reasons fundamentally why I suspect that gold and silver, while corrections and consolidations will come, are only going to work higher. And that bear is going to lose his blind.
And like you said, it has worked for thousands and thousands of years. Prove us wrong at this point, right? Or prove the thesis, or prove silver and gold's ability to insulate and to provide a safe harbor during these difficult times. Prove it wrong. I would rather go with the 1,000 years of history. Peter, thank you for joining us today. On behalf of the viewer, right, we've had this third person with us that's benefited from hearing your perspective on what's going on. If people want to learn more about you, they can go to petergrandich.com. Is that correct?
Yes, the website is petergrandich.com. There's also a YouTube channel, but everything and anything I do, whether it's done on the YouTube or the blog, is on my Twitter. I can't call it X. It's always going to be called Twitter in my view. But there is the best place to follow whatever I'm thinking or saying or doing.
Okay, so they can follow you on Twitter. You have a YouTube channel and petergrandich.com. What about, are you affiliated with a financial planning firm? Anything you want to say in that regard?
Sure. So separately, there is a planning group I've been associated with for over 25 years. It's only for U.S. residents. We believe that cash flow is the answer to financial success, not trying to increase net worth. The more efficient you are with your cash flow, the better off you're going to be financially. And yes, that information could be found on my blog at petergrandich.com.
Okay, and I want to throw in, I guess I registered on your blog, or at some point had said that I wanted to get, I get a daily email from you, which seems like every day of the week, and it's always something very interesting pertaining to what's going on in the precious metals sector. So, Peter, as usual, it's been great to talk to you, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time.
And you tell that buddy over there, it's only a matter of time.
$2,500 gold, and watch out because Peter's coming for you. I'll let him know.
Thank you, Ronnie. God bless.